Hi, my name's Laurie Pneumatikos, and I'm the co-host of the 2016 International Left-Hand Path Conference in Atlanta at the Sheraton Gateway Hotel. In fact, that's where we're at right now. We're in the executive boardroom, and we're having our first panel discussion. And so we have Bob Podgurski here, and we have Typhon Draconis, and we have Toby Chappell. And we also have Alex and David. And Bob Podgurski is a presenter, and he will be talking about grid sigil magic. And Typhon Draconis will be talking about the Acozil. And Toby's just hopped on board today. So I guess we'll let Toby talk a little bit about what he's going to talk about at the conference.
Oh, now?
Yes.
I will be speaking about the connection between starry wisdom and the left-hand path. Starry wisdom is the study of the night sky and the things that it teaches us about what it means to be a self-aware individual, as well as what it can teach us about seeing the patterns that we see above us within ourselves and use it as a reflective tool.
All right. That sounds really fascinating. And speaking of the left-hand path, it is called the Left-Hand Path Consortium. And so a lot of people out there may have some questions about what exactly is the left-hand path. Some people have asked me what it is as opposed to the right-hand path and just what it is in general. So I would like each of you to kind of give us your thoughts on that. I guess we'll start with Bob and just work our way around.
Well, I think the most useful thing is to deal with an expanded definition of it, because in classical or more academic terms, the left-hand path had been associated, I guess, from studies in the East and within India with the Vamamarg, the Kaudara sects of Tantra, a fairly structured yogic sex magic system wherein the Suvasini, the priestess, is basically using her body as a limbic in an alchemical process to manifest the kalas in her body, distill them, and then be able to distribute them amongst the aspirants within the group. Now, but I think now that's taking it from a very formal point of view. My interest and my concern is, I think of, I had spoken to Garrett Lansing, the poet, once about, we were talking about tantric, and his attitude was that tantric was sort of a misnomer because there is no such thing as yoga that is not tantric. The term itself is a fairly old one. It comes from tanu, to weave, or to stretch, to pull. So when you think of it in terms of that, he has a good point. There really is no such thing as any type of yoga which is not stretching or pulling at the weave of the fabric of the body, the mind, the devotion, raja, etc. So that, I would contend that the left-hand path is, the real focus is to develop an awareness of what some might call the dark side, the darker side of the soul, the self on one level. The reverse side of the tree of life, maybe the cliff off, is another way to look at the, as opposed to the chakras on the front, the power zones on the back, the black sun, etc. And so it's in my humble estimation that there is no such thing as magic that is not connected to a left-hand path working once one has adjusted oneself to gaining that level of awareness. It's not like you can then, in my estimation, shut yourself off from an awareness of that and how it interconnects within any other type of system or discipline you're working with.
Great. Very good. Typhon?
My view is that there's an inherent antinomian nature to the left-hand path. people who want to be good and surrender to the cosmic order as it is, who wish to accept the will of nature as it is, as opposed to those who wish to impose their will upon that order. I think that the draw to the left-hand path is something one's born with. The term mark of Cain works very well, and I think overall what we're talking about is it is not, to my mind, developing one's ego. The ego still has to be destroyed, and something else different remains, which is where alchemy comes in, I suppose. But the calcination and then reconstitution, solve et coagula, that's part of the process. So although my first steps on the path were really with the Church of Satan, I was a member of that from 72 to 75, and then left with another organization where I was a priest for a while. And all of that experience has left me really not looking for organizations. Most of what I've woven together for myself is a pastiche of paradigm piracy. I studied with Tibetan lamas when I lived in New York. I loved their ritual implements. I borrowed some concepts from there. But the concept of the Acozil, which dovetails with the clip-off very, very well. What I see of the right-hand path, in my opinion, is that it is about moving with the cosmic order, and the left-hand path is about giving the middle finger to IHVH and creating your own world as you wish it to be. And the way you do that involves certain techniques that we can talk about.
Okay, but I've got a question about that. So by imposing your will, are you saying that you're not moving with the flow of the cosmos? Because I think you can be on the left-hand path and you can gauge the flow of the cosmos and use it to your advantage to sort of allow the universe and work with the universe to create, to manifest your will.
I would agree. I think the issue is being a sailor rather than just going where the current.
Okay, and in that case, you would be directing the sails. You'd be moving the sails saying, this is where I want to go. I don't want to go down that road because I'll be poor and I'll be homeless and I'll die. But if I go down this road, I'm going to be successful and I'll be able to feed my family and whatever. But, the bottom line is, I don't think you're really going against the flow of the cosmos so much.
You're commanding the flow to move in accordance with your will. That's where the whole concept of the Acozil comes in.
Okay.
It's manufacturing synchronicity. It's hacking reality. It's creating the vision of the is to be that then sucks the necessary causes into itself, and then there it is.
Right. And you mentioned the ego, and I think it's important that we clarify that because your left-hand path doesn't mean you can let your ego just go run amok, because people who, there's plenty of examples in the history of magic and the occult to point to and say, that person's ego got out of control and it screwed up their life. So I'm glad you mentioned the ego, because I think it's very important that we point out that this doesn't mean you run out there and force your will on everybody else and force your will, because if you try to force things and just to feed your ego, it's going to jump up and bite you in the ass so quick, and then you'll learn, and then what happens to your ego?
Yes.
It gets annihilated. One way or the other, it's going to annihilate your ego, and then you're going to rise from the flames like a phoenix, hopefully.
Well, my view is that what happens to the ego, you cannot interact with the Acozil in your normal, linear, rational consciousness. I see the ego as basically a structure of scars that's inflicted by material reality. I reach out and put my hand on the stove and get burned. I learned that if I pick this up and drop it, it goes down, okay? So the ego and reason, which are really parts of the same concept for me, is really a means of going with reality as it is constituted, as opposed to doing what you need to be able to put your mind into that nonlinear, I call it unreason, not irrational, unrational.
Right.
Yeah. Where reason doesn't apply because it's Acozil. The
Right.
effect creates its causes.
Right.
I mean, that's what magic is, in my mind.
Yeah.
So Typhon, when you brought up about the notion of the destruction of the ego being a key component in being able to facilitate the magical process, when you brought that up and thinking about what the left-hand path represents overall, I had to think for a minute, and I'm wondering, is the destruction of the ego actually something that is possible? Or is this Maya itself? Is it an illusion to think that the ego can be destroyed? Is it possible that really what the left-hand path is about is attaining equilibrium, balancing out?
I understand what you're asking. To my mind, it is impossible to have contact with the Acozil, and it would be like dropping acid with nothing happening.
Okay.
And the effect is very similar. The real issue is the horror, the adumbration in Lovecraft stories.
Yes. Which I
What
love.
that is how normal people, those without the mark of Cain, perceive contact as the Acozil. It's threatening. It's mind-deranging. If I could put it all together, I'd be insane.
Insane, yes.
Okay? So and you are insane when you are in that state. You're insane in the sense that you're not in your rational mind. Okay? So in magic, we're stepping out of this cause and effect universe and creating an effect that then becomes, as it were, its own cause and then sucks the effects into it. For instance, the Chaos School and Crowley wrote about effects that manifested, doing a working and the letter arrives from the United States to England the next day, that kind of thing. So what is it? Are we destroying the ego? Yeah, we're sure rearranging it. A mind, this is why so many neophytes flip out in chamber. It's not just religious indoctrination. If you've ever examined someone who's had a bad initial ritual experience, it's usually because they've had some contact with this headspace and their head is about to pop open. So in order to, working with it changes you. And that's the rearrangement that occurs. Obviously, magi can be assholes. Look at Crowley.
Yeah, exactly.
At least
Wait a minute, equal time here, he's not the only one.
No, he's not.
No, that's
But when
Let's not
Yeah,
just
look
pick
at
on
it.
any one mage.
when you put it in
who's
that
like-
light, it seems to me that on one level, just maybe a purely semantic when we talk about destroying the ego, but what we're really talking about is healing the
Streamline.
being.
You know, if your mind is not resilient, you can't do it. And if you try to do it with an inflexible mind, you'll break your mind. Okay? It's sort of like, what did Timothy Leary say? I do not do hallucinogens these days, but I sure did in college.
Sure.
And the bottom line is that if you don't go with the flow, you're going to become that glass, or you're going to rip your own eyeballs out when, you know, a Tibetan wrathful Buddha appears in front of you, as one of my classmates did. He bilaterally enucleated himself.
Oh, we could have done without that picture.
Yeah, but you know, if your mind can't flex, it breaks. And so, whatever you want to call that, is that destroying the ego? Is it rearranging it? Is it balancing it? I don't know. You know, what happens when you lose 100 pounds? You're still you, but you're not really the same person. What happens when you have a conversion in your view of the universe that really stands what you used to be on its head?
Yeah.
I've never had that. I read the Satanic Bible when I was 17, and I've been on the left-hand path all along. I was greased by Ayn Rand and Nietzsche, and having done yoga, you know, because the Beatles were doing it, you know, I was 14 or 15. But, you know, I read that, and like a bat to darkness, I have never feared.
The way I've always looked at the idea of destroying or transcending or rearranging with the ego, whichever way of looking at it makes most sense, is this idea that most people identify what it's actually themselves with things that are really personality traits they've acquired or incidental things about them, like the fact that they were born in the United States of America. But to really know who yourself is, you have to break through those, and you have to discard those to the extent that you're able to, so that you can get down to what's the actual you that's underneath all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's, you know, my concept is mirrored in what you're saying. It's a self that's generated from the inside out, not the scars inflicted on you. Not in Spain, in order to make beggar children more pitiable so they get more money, they would put the child in a pot around its body so it would grow up deformed, sort of like binding Chinese women's feet. Okay? And then they break the pot and send the misshapen kid out to beg. That's what most of us have had done to us by reality and the people.
Religion.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And, you know, to my mind, LaVey, as an ex-member of the Church of Satan when he was still in his prime, he had that philosophy down right. If you simply admit telepathy is possible, you wed essentially Ayn Rand and Nietzsche fused together with the concept of telepathic hypnotism. And that's where I was for a long time. You know, there's no need for any of this. You know, there's vital force. You can go learn Qigong. Other cultures call it different things. And if I can put a thought in someone's mind, as what they said in the wee hours of the morning while they're in REM sleep, I can motivate their behavior just like a computer virus can make your computer do things. Yeah. Then as my development went on, I realized true magic is able to affect non-living systems unless one wants to become an animist or something and assume that all things are alive in some sense.
Well, I think you touched on an interesting, I thought was really interesting about LaVey was the focus of his rituals was to break that, to break that indoctrination, that societal indoctrination and religious indoctrination. And so, you know, he even said that was the goal of the ritual, was to sort of, I don't know, break up that part of the ego maybe.
Right, to hold that mirror up so you can see it for what it is.
And, of course, they call it, breaking the taboo, but really you're forming new taboos. But,
You remember that song, Let It All Hang Out?
Well, that's why you refer to the type of rituals that he would do as psychodramas.
Yes,
They're intended to, in a dramatic, confrontational way, to allow you to see your psyche for what it is, not what you've grown up around it that are preventing you from seeing what's actually there.
Yeah, because we live in a society where society tells us how to think. And we go to church, and the church tells us how to think. We go to school, they tell us how to think. We go to work, they tell us how to think. So he wanted to find a way to facilitate people who wanted to sort of break out of that paradigm and discover what they really think, rather than take on somebody else's thought process.
And that would be the self-development part of the Church of Satan at that point of time, where I feel like I can speak with authority since I was there and I've done it. But there's no question that results were expected from operative workings, and that's always been, Bob and I were discussing, Laurie and I were discussing this at dinner last night, that there's a huge amount of magic that's aimed simply at self-transformation. And to my mind, if that is not backed by being able to make things happen in the real world, then it's all self-delusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Toby, tell us what your impression, how you see the left-hand path.
Sure. To me, the left-hand path at its core is non-union. Basically, what you are trying to have union within yourself so that you have as coherent a self as possible, but not to join that to an external thing such as God, the Tao, nature, etc. And in order to do this, in order to go about this, one needs to cultivate self-awareness. This kind of takes two different aspects of it. There's the introspective aspect of the Delphic maxim of know thyself, doing through magical work, through introspective work, diary work, reflective work with others, of truly understanding what it is that's you beneath all of the facade, beneath all the character armor that may be on top of it. The other side of this is more operative. This is what we would typically refer to as magic. This is making things happen. This is making things happen within your own self, making things happen within the world outside that self as well. And the extent to which you can meld those two, this operative and this introspective, increases the ability to which you can cultivate this self-awareness and this unique individuality that we all have innate within us. Now, looking at this in contrast to the right-hand path, many people who are only passingly familiar with the terms would tend to conflate right-hand path with the good, left-hand path with the evil, which is a very simplistic way of looking at things. These things are rarely as black and white as people want them to be, whether moral issues, ethical issues, issues of justice, etc. But part of how this is cultivated is the learning to both know and to fulfill what you think of, what you come to know as your destiny. I don't make a distinction between destiny and fate here because they're often used interchangeably. Fate, looking back to the earliest roots of it in Latin, fatum, this is something that is static. This is something you have no control over. This is something that's been imposed upon you. This is within the left-hand path. This is what we're striving to break free from. Destiny, on the other hand, it doesn't presuppose that there's this static future that you have no choice to move towards. It's more malleable. But in order to get there, in order to have control over it, you have to know what's come before, what you've done, what the trajectory is that you've set for yourself, and to take control of that trajectory so that you can then shape what you need your destiny to be and then work towards it. So it's really about influencing likelihoods at that point, of knowing what path you've set for yourself, what you've managed to to change about yourself, to put yourself going in the specific direction you want to go in, and then through both these introspective and operative means that I refer to of using the two of them to move towards what you see as that destiny that you yourself have created and that you yourself control. And that's, to me, that's the essence of what the left-hand path is.
That's fantastic. That's what I've been trying to tell people for years, but I could not put it so eloquently, and I absolutely, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you putting it that way.
You said, know thyself, know thyself, the right-hand path to my mind would be, know thyself in thyself. So that's Zen Buddhist answer to the Delphic Oracle.
Okay.
Well, some of it becomes, to what end do you know yourself? Know yourself to the point to then just become one with the Tao, to become one with God, to submerge what that is that you know, and to know it so you can get rid of it. In contrast to know it so that you can cultivate it, know it so that you can become as much like what that ideal is as you're able to. And so that's another way of looking at that critical distinction between the left and the right.
You can look at it from the viewpoint of entropy as well. Life is anti-entropic. Mm-hmm. And to my mind, the right-hand path is about nature and going with the flow. It's entropic. Mm-hmm. While we're alive, we're anti-entropic. We ingest food, we breathe air, we take the order out of it, and it becomes part of us, and then we cast off parts of it. And then when we die, we turn back to dirt. We go back to...
Spare made an interesting statement to that effect. He said higher states of consciousness are necessarily connected with a awareness of lower body functions. Lower forms of
Muladhara chakra.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the root, pardon me, of it all. I couldn't resist the pun.
Yeah.
Well, yes. And that's actually one of the thrusts in Prometheus Rising with Robert Anton Wilson. He leverages Timothy Leary's eight circuit model, the different aspects of both your physical aspects and the non-physical aspects of yourself, leveraging them, pitting them against each other in a lot of ways in order to know your entire self, so that you can transcend all of it. So you're not just one of these components, which is what most people tend to, because you will tend to settle into the one that gives you the most pleasure, the one that gives you the least pain. But knowing all of them enables you to become a more whole person as well, which is also connected with the essence of the left-hand path, of being a whole person into and of yourself, and not just the sum of your parts and nothing more.
Anton LaVey reminded us we're built on an 8 chassis.
Yes.
Okay.
So, David, tell us what you think about the left-hand path.
Well, the left-hand path was something that was fairly taboo to me, meaning I was scared of it. I heard left-handed path, I would hear black magic, I would hear all sorts of spooky things associated with the left-hand path, and that I was supposed to be working on this more traditional route toward, I guess you'd say, the union with God and the enlightenment, and the harps start playing, and I've got my feedback, I've done good. But when I started to make the connections, because I have a strong background in studying psychology, humanist psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, more than just your average 101 course, when I started to realize that the transformation that we would be encouraging patients to make, whether it was through talk therapy, inpatient programs, whatever kind of setting, that in essence we were encouraging them to climb Maslow's pyramid to the top and self-actualize. And in itself, it was a very selfish process. Mm-hmm. And in this case, the selfishness led to a better existence. So it wasn't, in terms of what society conditions us to believe, which is selfishness is bad, and, if you're selfishness, you're going to go with all the other bad boys and girls to hell or whatever. So when I made that breakthrough,
We throw a hell of a party.
like me and my friends said, we'll be working the tab. So
We
once-
have the best chocolate.
when I made that connection, it was a lot easier for me to break through those societal taboos and actually start to take, to let my occult studies actually be all encompassing. And then, I still didn't even make that association until I, stumbled upon the site and was like, wait a minute, this is all merging together now and it all makes sense and there's no, I guess, weirdness or taboo left over. So for me, it was breaking through taboos, mostly.
That's great, thank you.
And kind of merging the occult with modern behavioral sciences too, so.
Yes, and there is a huge connection there, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because, we talk about that among ourselves a lot when we're wanking stuff over dinner, but we don't really think about actually talking about it in front of a camera or writing about it very much, really, the psychological aspects of it. So, Alex, what is your impression of the left-hand path? How do you see it?
Yeah, this is actually, I had a completely different, view of what I might say before everyone started talking. A lot of good things have been said, but I feel like, so the way I started thinking about things initially when I heard about this term is that, what I started with is like looking into chaos magic, and then that led me into Discordianism, and also I was, at the same time, I was learning the game Dungeons and Dragons, which a lot of people take, it's funny because I read online, this guy said, this is the only hobby you'll ever have where people will tell you that it's both, childish and highly dangerous all at the same time. And I thought that was just like, it really describes the experience. Because
Gateway drug to dark.
yeah, it's a gateway drug to darkness, but you're like doing math and like writing things out. And so in the game, there's this thing called alignment, which is supposed to explain, morality and all that. So there's the good alignments, which are about law and goodness, and then there's the bad alignments, which are chaos and evil. And so the characters that I always used to play were chaotic neutral, which is someone that is just doing, the weirdness and the craziness all the time. And so how I explain to people in the game is that, chaotic neutral is not about doing the crazy thing, it's about doing the whimsical thing or the weird thing. So whereas someone that's lawful good is the Southern Baptist that wants to, please the church and the state and is all about order and is doing these things sort of just because the chaotic neutral person is, instead of being attuned to nature or attuned to the good, you're being attuned to the chaos. So the idea that, someone else might see, running the stoplight as the evil thing, whereas you're trying to figure out, well, okay, how can I run the stoplight, not hurt anybody, and not get caught? And that's our goal for today. We're not going to church. We're going to say, well, okay, this cop's running the red light. Maybe I'll become a cop so that I can run red lights all the time. And so the other part of that is, I would say, people are always saying that the right hand path is about being attuned to nature, and then the left hand path is all about yourself. But it's not necessarily being attuned versus not attuned. It's like what are you into? Because you can say you can go out to nature and have a great experience, and the birds are chirping and all this kind of stuff.
And you can do a great black magical work.
Yeah, but you can also go out into nature and there's a dog that got run over by a car, like that's nature, and then you look at the dog and there's flies coming out of it, and there's so it's like nature is not the fluffy bunny thing either. So it's all about you can be focused on yourself, but it's the same thing as nature. There are some people that look inside and it's there's fairies and butterflies, and there's other people that look in there and it's
a misshapen teratoma.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing for me about being attuned to the chaos awareness is that it's sort of like when you're like let's say so there's this guy Giordano Bruno. He says that in his own diaries that the weird thing that happened to him is that he was So he started in this in a room. He was becoming a priest and he's a monk, and he's in this room and it's filled with all these paintings of it's got icons, and there's a painting of his abbot in the monastery. There's a painting of Jesus. There's someone else, and then he's got all these books where he's learning theology in the Bible. And one by one, things just start to irritate him. So he can't really get rid of the book because he has to have them. So he takes his book and he takes all of his books and gives it to someone else. But then without the books there to read, he begins to fixate on the pictures. So he doesn't like his abbot because he has a run with him, so he removes the picture of the abbot. Then he starts to fixate on the picture of the saint, which begins to irritate him because, well, now he feels like he's worshiping the saint. So then the only thing that he's left in the room with is he's got a picture of Jesus and the cross. Or he moves the picture of Jesus because he doesn't want to worship a picture. So now he has the picture of the cross, or now he has an actual cross. Now he's really fixated on the cross and how this is evil, and he begins to have all these thoughts about how, now I'm staring at this like I was reading the book and everything, and he was really attuned to, it was almost like he says that he felt like this cross, this wooden object, was talking to him. So he was attuned to this, and then he says, like, I don't like what was coming out of this. So he says, well, I've got to, try to tune into something else. So there are some people like that's what happens to them. You get in this space, and there's all these things talking with you, and it's okay as long as there's, you've got your Bible and someone tells you how to organize things, but as soon as you get into a space where there's no organization, things start coming out at you, and you have no idea where it came from.
Right.
And so that's, I think, for me, the point of, is there are some people that, like, as you say, you go in there, you have this experience, and you go crazy. They think this is something, to avoid. But so the spiritual aspect for me behind Discordianism, behind all the jokes and all that kind of stuff, is that I actually had, I was lucky or unlucky enough to have an experience where I was just sitting there in chemistry class one day, and I was staring at this rubber eraser and not paying attention to the teacher, and then all of a sudden it clicked into everything in the lesson that I thought I was ignoring. It all clicked at the same time, where I realized, hey, me and this rubber eraser are identical. It's molecules. You could rearrange those, like, I don't know how we could do this scientifically, but theoretically you could rearrange those molecules and it would be my hand. But I'm holding this thing, which is my hand, and the rubber thing, which is my hand, and I was just like, you could zoom out of that and it's like, but the room is like this, and all these people are like this. I was black and mostly all white school, and I was like, but it's all the same because I've got melanin in my skin, but you're not completely lacking melanin, and even if you were, there's still a code there for where the melanin would be. And you zoom out and you zoom out and you zoom out, and I was like, hold on, biology teacher just told me that the same, there's an organ that creates the penis and a vagina. That's the same. There's no man, woman either.
That's right.
And you zoom out and you're like, the guy in Cosmos says that, it's all star stuff. So it's like, oh, me and the Earth are the same. And then it's just like the different, Mercury is Venus, which is Mars, and it's like, and so it's not just made out of the same stuff, but you zoom out in time, and it's literally the same thing. The moon used to be a part of the Earth, gets hit by an asteroid, but that asteroid was also part of the Earth at one time, and then you go all the way back, and there's the Big Bang, and I hit this, and I was sitting there, and it was all like a microsecond. I tell people, it was like, I literally opened a door, and it was all these things. This wasn't like a 30-minute conversation. It was one like millisecond.
Yeah.
So where'd you get the DMT?
He was manufacturing it in his brain.
No, it's like,
I can't believe they made that illegal because we produce it.
Right, and so
We're illegal.
what I get from my side of the left-hand path is the idea is to not to avoid that, because what I realized is like that moment that I had, that is the universe. You can rephrase things, you can put dots on top of it or whatever, and there's things where you can go, but like that's what it really is. And the problem is as meaningful and as amazing as that experience was to me, I realized that like, well, that's great, but that by itself, like, it still doesn't mean anything, because it's like I'm not a rock, but I am and I'm not, and it's like you still got to go out there and do something with it. So for me, what the left-hand path is about is not running away from that room with all the scary stuff. It's learning to live in that room, because in a way, like all of this stuff that makes sense to me, this is the delusion. That moment that I had in chemistry class, that's the real thing. Because if I can give everyone in the world that moment in the right way, that gets rid of not just like sexism and racism, but war, and it's like if you could give that everybody in the world in the right way. And so that's what it's about. It's about not being afraid of that craziness room yourself, and then also trying to figure out how you can manufacture that for others, but in a small, compartmentalized way.